Welcome back to you. I'm just laughing as I read this. I don't listen to the CBC very often, but the other day I heard some discussion on the radio, and it was really very funny. It was, I think they called it the Thursday think tank. They pronounce all their T's, all the hard letters are pronounced very... the people, they don't sound like anyone I've ever heard in Canada, outside of maybe a very, very posh part of Toronto and Montreal. And anyway, they were discussing why in troubled areas of Toronto, and it goes on and on, it's absolutely tragic, why kids are killing kids. I mean, it's blowing them away. And one woman said, it's because we've told them it's okay by going to war in Afghanistan, and when Stephen Harper went there dressed as G.I. Joe, this encouraged them. Stephen Harper had to wear a flak jacket because he's the Prime Minister and he's in a war zone. But anyway, they were also discussing what defines Canada. These are the 7 wonders of Canada, and it really was very, very funny to listen to because there was one woman who suggested the igloo. I always think of the igloo, but she said, the igloo, of course, but they can't get the packing snow anymore. It's because of...
Global?
Yes! I actually laughed out loud in the car.
The thing about that is because if you ask the Innu, I'm sure they all really wish they were living back in igloos.
Well, it's massively patronising, it's contemptuous, it's... and
it's I think, the CBC, I believe you said it was the CBC. Why must you characterize it beyond that?
I think the show was called Sounds Like Canada, which is beautifully and deliciously ironic, because the last thing it sounds like is Canada, but these 7 wonders, I don't know what they're like.
You're falling into the trap of believing that Canada isn't a group of urban activists who listen to the CBC.
Listen, you know what, first of all, and I think we've all worked for the CBC at some point.
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah, and so did I. Here, listen, they do some things well, and God bless them. Some things
Hockey.
not as well. And the fact,
yes,
I'm so glad you brought up that accent, that particular way of enunciation.
Because CBC radio talk?
Oh, it just kills me. I don't know if your voice changes when you get on the air. I'm not sure, but the point, it's on radio. But anyway, what you're saying with these wonders,
I just snorted. I'm sorry.
I think it's interesting that they're trying to, find some Canadiana. I thought one of the funniest criteria of this competition, when they put it in front of the panel of judges, was it had to be Canadiana-like, whatever that is. We're trying to find some things to be proud of in our culture, our cultural identity. I liked some of the things they selected.
Mountains aren't part of our culture.
What's that?
Mountains aren't part of our culture.
The teepee and the igloo, I thought were interesting choices.
Given Old Quebec City, Halifax is Q21.
What's amazing? If you look at the usual debate on what is Canadian culture, it always comes down to one thing. And if they want to find the wonder of Canada that according to the people in CBC think, defines what makes Canada great, it's the border, because the only thing they ever really come up with is, we're not American, right? So it should be the border.
You see the way they have the canoe and the igloo? See, this misunderstanding of Toronto being the largest Italian city outside of Italy, perhaps the largest Portuguese city outside of Portugal, the number of ethnic groups that now make up this country, the urban nature
of Canada.
But Michael,
those are white oppressor groups. Now, you're being unfair.
To be serious on your sarcasm here, I think that when I looked at the panel, I thought, typical. They have to make sure they're so politically correct. We've got to...
It's a guy from some rock band I've never heard of.
Bono was in there?
It was the arts crowd. We had a musician. There was someone representing our First Nations. There were a few other people. I can't remember them now. Point is, it had to be a very politically correct panel. I think the thing that has galvanized Canada more than anything in the last 10 years is the Molson Canadian, I Am Canadian commercials with Joe. I mean, Canada doesn't need our elites to tell us what makes our country great. I have more respect for their Greatest Canadian contest a couple of years ago.
They picked Tommy Douglas, didn't they?
No, because the point is they had a mix in there. They had real cultural heroes.
They didn't pick Don Cherry, which is when I stopped watching.
But I'm just saying...
Tommy Douglas had interesting views on people who were handicapped and eugenics.
What I'm saying is that seemed to be more representative of the people of Canada. It had a sports celebrity in there. It had Suzuki in there. It had other people in there.
Laura,
this seems to me like it was very much selected by a panel of
One day someone will come up to the CBC and they will privatize it, and they will say, you have to sink or swim on merit. And then we'll talk about the CBC to our grandchildren the way we talk about manual typewriters. Because if you had to sink or swim on merit, it'll be Hockey Night in Canada. You know what it'll be? And Now the National with Don Cherry.
Do you know what?
That's what it'll be.
They do documentaries well. They do sketch comedy.
They don't do documentaries well. They do left-wing polemics well.
They're very ones. Look, their dramas are awful. I mean,
their dramas are awful.
They're all laughable apart from the comedies that aren't at all laughable.
The comedies are good. The documentaries are good.
News coverage isn't bad.
No, the Nationals.
Yeah, but it's very
biased. They go in depth. But they don't. Listen, no, I'm never going to argue that they are right of center. They've always had a left
I'd like them to be center. I wouldn't mind if they were center. And the other thing is, go outside of the so-called Golden Horseshoe. Go out to the rest of Canada, where the real people live, and ask them how relevant the CBC is to their lives. And other than the people who cried over Zosky and the Vinyl Cafe or whatever it's called, people couldn't care less.
Except for Corner Gas and...
Corner Gas is CTV.
Is it CTV?
It's CTV.
Oh, let's break on that point. He won. Back in a few moments. Don't go away.